Are you looking for test taking strategies for your child, especially if they have dyslexia? You're in luck. Today I have 6 of them. My name is Kathleen and I'm a dyslexic here to help other dyslexics. I help busy, overwhelmed parents understand their child's frustration with dyslexia so they can support, encourage, and empower them. Let's get into the video. When it comes to education, dyslexia is frustrating, especially when it comes to taking standardized tests. It is beyond frustrating because we know the information, but it doesn't come out because picking between A, B, C, and D options does not come easily to me or most of the time any other dyslexic. And it's so frustrating because we know the information if it was presented in a different way. Standardized testing is just frustrating for dyslexics. But I have learned a few tips and tricks that make it much easier, and I'm going to be sharing those with you today. These have helped me in the past and they have helped my students. So let's get into this, but also know that this doesn't define you. And if you need a little motivation on what dyslexics are good at, I'm going to link advantages of dyslexia right here. Tip number 1 is if you have the accommodation of the test being read out loud, take full advantage of that. And you can get that with a 504 plan or an IEP. But if you do not have that accommodation, then read each question twice. That's right. The first time you're reading it to decode and figure out the words. The second time you're reading it to understand the question. So this is very important to make sure that you're reading it twice so you fully understand what the question is asking. Tip number 2 is to either underline, highlight, or figure out the key words in the questions. That's right, there are specific words that really stand out to help you figure out which is the answer. An example of this in math is sum. That means you're going to add them. Difference, that means you're going to subtract. Quotient, you're going to multiply, and things like that. Another big one is always. If you see the word always, that is a huge keyword to helping you figure out which one's the answer. Or the biggest one that I always have every single student underline is when you see not. Which of the following is not? That means 3 are true and 1 is not. You're picking the one that is not. That is a huge keyword, and making sure that you understand the keywords and the vocabulary is a huge way to help with this. And underline that so you focus in and know what the question's asking. Tip number 3 is to eliminate the answers you know are not correct. So most of the time when it comes to standardized testing, there are 4 options. And when you sit down and you read it and you listen to them, most of the time you can eliminate 1, if not 2 of those very quickly. If you know those are wrong, just go ahead and cross it off if you're allowed to write in the test booklet. If you're not, what I always did is I always had a blank piece of paper. I numbered with how many questions and I wrote A, B, C, and D. And I would cross off and make notes on the side. So if you're not allowed to write it, I would have a scratch piece of paper and I would diligently work through and write. If you are allowed to write on the test booklet or the test paper, go ahead and do it. Make all the markings on there. So if you know that answer is wrong, just go ahead and cross off A or whatever letter it is to make it easier. Most of the time you can eliminate 2 of the options right off the bat. This makes it a 50-50 chance. So you could mark that answer. You could mark it and give it a guess. And then I always put a question mark on that question to know that I needed to come back and look at it because the answer might come to me later or I might find the answer in another question. So I would always mark it with a question and review them at the end. Tip 4 goes along with tip 3. If you are unsure of the answer, go ahead and skip it and mark it to come back to it later. one of the things that I always focused on in college is answering the questions I knew right away. So I would have my test taker read all of the questions to me. I would mark and make markings throughout, and then I would put questions if I didn't know. Most of the time, I had the same proctor all the time giving me the test. So she knew the minute I wrote question mark, that meant we're moving on to the next question. I wasn't going to waste my time in the beginning trying to figure it out. Then, if for some odd reason, and this happened so many times, the answer would be in another question, I would be able to go back. And she would always know when I grabbed that test that I was going back because we had just found one of those answers. And the other thing is always start with a question you know, because it's a huge self-confidence booster knowing that you've gotten one answer correct. So always find an easy question that you already know the answer and start there, and then work your way to harder and harder questions. Tip number 5 is the biggest one I have. And honestly, most people don't take advantage of it, but this definitely takes time and training. So, when it comes to reading passages, and I know here in Texas, they've changed it to where they are testing reading. So the questions can be read, but the reading passages can't because we're testing reading. And I have a feeling other states follow that, which is very frustrating for a dyslexic because it just is. I know I'm very frustrated with this. But here's how to make this really easy for you. So before you read the passage, read the questions. That's right. Read all of the questions you are getting ready to need to know about the reading passage. This way you know exactly what you're looking for. And once you've answered all those questions, even if you're not finished reading the passage, you can move on. I know that I trained my students to do this, and come testing day, they never did it. And I would watch that we would spend forever. They would read the passage, then we would read the questions. They would ask me to read the questions, and then I would watch them go back and read the passage again. So to avoid reading the passage twice, read the questions first, know what you're looking for, and then go read the passage. And it becomes much easier to figure out and read because you're looking for key pieces of information as you read, and once you find that, you can answer the question. Tip number 6 is the easiest tip I have, and that's complete the bubble part or the Scantron last. Do the entire test. Write which ones you can if you can write in the test booklet. If not, write them on the scratch piece of paper that I talked about earlier. And either write the answer like A or whatever it is, or circle it. Make it obvious which one it is. And then that way, if you change your answer, you're not messing up the Scantron and it can be graded correctly. So put that off to the side and fill it out last. I always did that. I would make sure I had the test. I would go back. I would answer all of the ones that I put question marks on. At the end, I would change the answers. But I also learned that most of the time my gut instinct was right. So the first answer that I always picked was always the answer, even though sometimes I would talk myself into changing it. So sometimes going back and looking at it, you might just want to leave those answers alone, because I would always get a higher grade when I trusted my gut instinct and went with the one that came to mind first. Then I filled in the Scantron, felt really good about it, and then I would take an extended break after I took a long test like that. There you have it. Those are 6 test-taking strategies and tips that I used that really helped me, that I have taught my students, and now I'm sharing those with you. I hope you found this video useful. If you did, please consider grabbing my resource that I've just finished updating, which is Dyslexia Challenges Made Easy. That's right. Every challenge a dyslexic has, I've put in a guide and given you exactly what you need to help support them with every single challenge, including reading challenges. I know that finding reading support, maybe it's not in your budget to have a one-on-one tutor teach them dyslexic therapy, but in this guide, I break down different ways that you can support your child with different price points. So maybe the computer program might be more in your budget. This way, you're supporting your child still, and they're getting the much needed reading intervention they need, but it comes with a reading program, or you could possibly do it yourself. There are so many options in Dyslexia Challenges Made Easy. So go ahead and grab that guide. It's only $27, and I can't wait to see you in the next one. Bye, guys.